streaming on Facebook, on UTC Mumbai, as well as Safe City. And we are really grateful that you took this time to join us today. My name is Elsa Marie De Silva. I'm the moderator and host, the founder and CEO of Red Dot Foundation. And today with me, we have some wonderful speakers and experts, and I hope you enjoy it. We'll just give people a few minutes more as well. I just wanted to say that. So in the meantime, whilst they are walking in, I'm going to launch a poll. So please take a moment. There are 2 questions, very easy. How are you feeling today? And who are you? Because we'd like to know who's in the room. And maybe in the chat section, you can also put in your name, the country you're coming in from, and what organization you're affiliated with. So those who are still walking in into this digital square, please take the poll. Welcome, first of all. Thank you for joining us. It's a very rainy evening in Mumbai, but there are people from all over the world, and it's amazing to connect over this platform with you on a topic that's so important and impacts all our lives, reimagining public spaces. We've just launched a poll, so it would be great if you could just answer these 2 questions so that we just know who's in the room. Also, if you could share in the chat box who you are, which country you're from, and what is it that you do. So that'll also give us an idea as to who's in the room. And I can see there are people from Kenya, from USA, of course, from India. I'm sure there are others from Philippines. There's Philippines, maybe some from Malaysia. There's Amman, Nigeria, Jordan, Amman, Jordan, UK. That's great. Welcome, everyone. Okay, so I'm going to end the poll, and yeah. So Tanya, would you like to share who's in the room with us? Tanya? Or Jyoti, maybe Jyoti, can you read the results of the poll?
Okay, sure. So the first question, how are you feeling today? 27% happy, 32% excited, 33% curious, 8% tired, 19% peaceful, and others. Number second is, are you, so 29% urban planner, 12% architect, 24% NGO and civil society, 5% government official, 19% student, and 10% others.
Okay, great. So we have a wide variety of people in this room, and that's really great because you need all kinds of people, all different stakeholders in an Urban Thinkers campus because we need different perspectives. And so I'm really, really thrilled once again to welcome you. My name is Elsa Marie De Silva. I'm the founder and CEO of Red Dot Foundation, also known as Safe City. I'm your moderator and host today. And our Urban Thinkers Campus is part of the series, part 2 series of the COVID-19 Urban Thinkers Campus organized by UN Habitat's World Urban Campaign. The topic that we are discussing today is reimagining public spaces. And the reason we are doing that is because, as you know, COVID-19 has grounded many of us. In Mumbai, for example, the city that I live in, we are still in lockdown mode. It's been extended to 31st of July. This disease, COVID-19, has demonstrated that overcrowded cities and mass transport systems can lead to galloping infection rates. Pandemics are not new. They have happened in the past too, and they have transformed cities in the past. So the cholera epidemics in the 19th century led to the introduction of modern urban sanitation systems in Europe. Bombay, which my city was then called, also had a major urban development post the bubonic plague over a century ago. And recently, in an advisory, the Union Housing and Urban Affairs Ministry in my country asked state governments to redesign public spaces so that they are more suited for pedestrians, walkers, and cyclers. So really, it's very important. How can we reimagine this space? Because, you know, we live in cities that are extremely, extremely crowded. Take Mumbai, for example, you have at least 22 million people living here. But as Yuval Noah Harari in the Financial Times in March said, this storm will pass, but the choices we make now could change our lives for years to come. And that's the reason why we are here today. So if you're on social media, please start a watch party from our Facebook page, but also tweet as we go along. We have some amazing speakers today. We are using the hashtags Take Action for Cities, Urban Thinkers, and you can follow Urban Campaign and UN Habitat on Twitter as well. So without any further ado, I'm going to explain what our session is about. So we are going to have a panel discussion for approximately around 40-45 minutes. And then we are going to break out into smaller groups so that we can really ask you, y'all are the experts in the room as well. What is it that y'all are doing, or what do y'all imagine? How can y'all imagine public spaces? So to help us deliberate, our speakers for today, we have Hitesh Vaidya, who is the director for the National Institute for Urban Affairs, India. We have Carme Gaul, who's the director for Catalan Agency for Development and Cooperation. She lives in Barcelona, Spain. Hitesh is from New Delhi. We have Omna Srini Ong, founder and managing director of Engender Consultancy from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. We have Prathama Manohar, founder of the Urban Vision. She's joining us from the west coast of India, from a small little town. Supriya Jan, who's the program manager for the Right to P campaign from Coro, India, an amazing organization. She's also from Mumbai. So welcome everyone. How are you doing today? If we can stop the slide share and we can have the speaker view. I'd like to ask Hitesh Vaidya the first question. What policy changes are required in the new COVID-19 scenario for public spaces? If you could just share some of this work that y'all are helping the government with to reimagine public spaces. And for the rest, I'd kindly request y'all to put yourselves on mute because it would help to focus on the speakers. Thank you.
Thanks, Alyssa. First of all, I take the opportunity to thank you for organizing such a, the topic which is so widely being talked about across the what is our relationship with the public space. So, first thing I'll say, right now, this is the reimagination of public space. 430 people registered. This itself is a virtual public space. So I think that's the reality now we are going to live with, the virtual public space. So I think it's a one form of going forward. Second, you did talk about, it has to be a collective responsibility and no experts. I think COVID has proved itself that there is no expert. The way we have interpreted the COVID, the corona crisis, whether it is WHO, UN, Indian organizations, governments, we know nobody is expert. Everybody is predicting. And so we all have to collectively, we are all in the game and we have to come. So having this breakup groups, I think that's a great idea to start with so that we all can collectively decide how do we want to go about it. And third, a thing which I'll just put it before I talk about again on 24th of March when India declared the lockdown. We have already have 3 months gone by. I think we might have to go another 6 months like this or another year like this. So we don't. I really don't see, what will be the difference after 3 months or 3 years or 6 months we open. What will be the difference? Will we behaving different? Will be taking a different policy decisions? It will all depend. So it's too early to say. Delhi, is also lockdown stage, partial lockdown, not a full lockdown. But people are totally scared of coming on the roads. It's not that they are not willing, but they are very scared of coming on the roads. Having said that, while we are talking about reimagining public spaces, I think first thing we need to really talk about what is that public space we are really talking about. How do we define the public space? Because if you really look at it, we are talking not only just parks and streets, but we have to talk about restaurants, retail shops, malls, neighborhood markets, theaters, bus shelters, schools, universities, culture centers. All of them have, and what has been the policy restrictions during the COVID? It has only been two policy restrictions. One has been that, and that has been to reduce the transmission, and one has been restrictive use of public space, and second has been social distancing. Now, the major thought which will be we need to really come up is how do we imply these two policy restrictions on our public spaces, how that these two restrictions will really impact the life once things become little normal. And I think there cannot be a single solution for anyone, because it will depend on the what is the function, what is the form, and what is the social density of this public space, and how is the connectivity of this public space. So if we have these four uh, areas where we'll define how the public space will be really look like moving forward. And again, as I told you, nobody is expert. And when we are reimagining and recalibrating about the public spaces, then, I just went through a couple of uh, uh, Zoominars or webinars which has happened last 3 months, because last 3 months we have seen more experts on the virtual than the experts actually. So I just looked at it. What are the four main areas they have been talking about when they are reimagining? And one is improve quality of green spaces at neighborhood level. I I think every city, every government is trying to do that. Second is release more street space for pedestrians and cyclists. Government of India, you already talked about, has already announced that they will support the cities when they start preparing cities for the more pedestrian streets and cyclists. We have also know the Paris has added 650 kilometers of cycle lane. Lima has added some 350 kilometers of lane. So all of that has been talked about. We have been talking about widening our sidewalks. So, in India, if you really look at, I go to my neighborhood. If in Indian terms, I will say that every local market or retail shops have done some kind of a jugaad, and it is a jugaad which is done to regulate the informal street economy there. So that has to be really looked at. new queuing up norms we see outside the shops, long queues, and they have taken up a lot of space. So how do you really manage those queues? That has to be discussed. And our neighborhood streets, because now everything is happening online, and if online has to happen, then the people who are coming for dropping off the things to your neighborhood level, or picking up the packets from your neighborhood level, then these people have to be really thought about. uh, as also, again, people are really scared of taking a public transport. India, we have not started a public transport as yet. But the whole idea, what I see, and there is that if people start coming to the public transport, then they will, it will create more, challenges for the citizens. So we assume that there will be a more pressure on the private side transport. There will be more vehicles on the road. So how do you manage that area? So, and then create a decentralized network of smaller greener spaces. So Government of India is talking about, in our one of the program, we have said that every city should have at least one minimum park available to that. So that's another area where we are working on. And last, which we have seen the coordination, is integrating local health departments with the sanitization of public spaces, adequate provision of clean public toilets, hand washing facilities in the public spaces. These are areas where we have been working with, the cities have been working. So I think, to start with, I will stop it here, and then how others have been talking. But as I told you, these are the 8 or 9 areas which we have seen across cities in India, as well as have read about across the world, that these are some of the measures which cities are taking up. And I'll be happy to listen to others if there are some other new ways of managing public spaces at this moment of time. And maybe I'll come back with the other thoughts once we listened on that.
Thank you, Hitesh. Kame, Barcelona has always been a leader in designing and managing public spaces. So can you tell us how we can use local community and stakeholders in the decisions regarding safe public spaces? And Spain really was one of the first countries that was adversely impacted, and then now y'all are pretty much back to normal. Europe, in fact, people are freely moving around. So can you share some of your experiences through this whole crisis? What has worked, what has not worked, and from your experience as well, pre-COVID?
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, thanks to Red Dot Foundation and to Elsa Marie for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here and very honored. And I think that, as has already been said, it's like a question that we are all focusing on. It's like, how do we go back to normal, or how do we create a new normality, and to get some learning from what's going on? No? I'm not sure if I can share something, because I think that's very important to explain what I'm talking about. I will just try just one, and if it's possible, host disabled. May I share something?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, no, it's like I cannot share it's.
Kajal will give you access.
Okay, it's just a very, very short thing, but I think it explains a lot about Barcelona. You will see. Not yet. Okay. If you don't, it doesn't matter. If you prefer, we can. Okay. Now it's just like this, and you see that? You are not seeing the.
Maybe you'll have to start the presentation.
Okay. You are not seeing it. Okay, no problem. Then I'll stop that. It's just, I'll tell you what it is. It's like children from the old town of Barcelona. It's old town, specifically old town, that it's usually full of tourists. Now there's nobody there. So they are asking they want to play on the street. So it means that for them, that's been impossible until now, because now there's nobody else but them. So they are playing in places that they didn't know that was their space. So that's very, very it's a heavy thing. I think it's you say, wow, when children need to say, hey, this is my space, it's because it was not before. So tourism was really a big issue in Barcelona, and the central area now it's just nobody there. So Barcelona is really we are feeling what it means, the closing down. It's really sometimes scary to walk the city center. And there's another situation that I wanted to talk about, just to explain how should we focus this kind of what the pandemic means on when we talk about public space is in Lleida, in a very agricultural area of Catalonia. Now it's like the harvest time, so fruits and vegetables. So there's a lot of people that goes there just, they are just, so sometimes it's not without legal status to work, that go there just to collect fruit and vegetables. So they were there and nobody did a thing for them. So they were homeless. So now the pandemic is, there's a comeback in Lleida because those people just couldn't have a place where make the confinement, and nobody took any action, any real action to help them to be somewhere safe and keep safe them and save the rest. So I think that the first thing is the commitment of the public administration. So the city council must be very, very conscious and have a clear understanding of the need for going further on this humanizing the city. So Barcelona has been doing that for many, many years, but still we have things that are not working well. And so it's a mixture of urban planning, mobility, economic development, schools. In fact, it's about this 15-minute city that so many people is talking about. Also now in Paris, the new mayor is like appointed a person just to talk about La Ville du Quart d'Heure, the quarter-hour city. So it is very important to trying to focus on the communities, on going back to really, really local. I think that the pandemic is giving us this idea of going really, really local. So the fact is that during the pandemic, that what we felt the most was the community support. That's been very key to tackle the difficulties experienced by the most vulnerable citizens. Public spaces are not anymore only moving places, but also places for expression, for protest, for social engagement, but places to be. So the social capital must be helped to create a kind of resilient neighborhoods and to make this kind of use available and useful for everyone. So many municipalities have been developing this kind of plans to support low-income families, elders, or precarious workers. But at the same time, the bottom-up mobilizations of neighbors, associations, and self-managed organizations revealed to be very, very important assets for these local communities. So in this new context, I think that there will be a clear need of balance between establishing safety, the health, the well-being for everyone, but respecting this individual and collective freedom at the same time. So it's not only about infrastructure, but about behavioral change. So communication, health, human rights should be in the center. So it's not only discussing with the Association of Neighborhoods, but how to include the citizens in the public debates and trying to put really to be effective open governments and create synergies with the citizens-led initiatives that are very, it's like part of this learning, this work in progress that I think that we should be more and more talking about trial and error, but shared by citizens and governments. Otherwise, it's not going to be working. And the participatory budget should be improved. It's a way also to make the citizens accountable for the decisions finally. It's like we are doing things because we decided all together. So this kind of temporary and pop-up measures that are encouraging walking, cycling in response of the coronavirus, I think that are very important and should push forward the conversation to this kind of more resilient ecological cities. And technology should be also helping us to do this kind of shift to a different kind of living that we are now experiencing, in a sudden way. But I think that we should try to do it in a long-term idea.
That's such a great overview, Karme, and it really builds on what Hitesh's points were, because we have to go local, and in fact our Prime Minister has said we have to be vocal for the local. So really about thinking about the community, making budgets available for participatory discussions, and really looking at green spaces for children and for seniors and for all of us, at the community level, making more space in public spaces. I think this is a great segue to Pratima, who is an urban planner and designer and architect. So what role does your tribe have in reimagining public spaces, especially in highly dense cities like Mumbai, where there's a crunch in space? So can space be redesigned to provide for personal protection, especially in a COVID-19 scenario and post-scenario, given, like Hitesh said, we must be prepared for like 3 years. 3 years is, I'm mentally prepared for 6 months more, but 3 years is a little too long for my comfort.
Yeah. Elsa, I just want to re-emphasize what you said at the start of this conversation, where you quoted the philosopher and historian and author Yuval Noah Harari, when in his op-ed yesterday on Financial Times, he said the storm will pass, but the choices we make could change our lives for the rest of the century. And I think we have to have this conversation by acknowledging the importance of this moment and the impacts it can have on our collective future for decades to come. For better or worse, the policy choices and designs made now during this crisis and immediately after will continue to impact our life for the rest of the century. And I think we should aim to choose policies and design ideas that deliver people-centric cities. Choice is ours, it's not out of our hand. It's not determined already. We can make the choice to be more inclusive or be more exclusive. For example, even if you think about public realm and mobility, at this moment in time, you could potentially move towards car-centric infrastructure or enable more movement of private car, and that's the worst type of decision to make at this point in time. And we are seeing a lot of cities do amazing things that will allow for people-centric cities, like Paris. I think Hitesh, I think, mentioned this, and lots of other cities. I know London is doing it too, which is improving walkability, improving the quality of public realm, investing in pop-up infrastructure like biking. And going back to, I'm going to speak about the long term and the medium term, but if we think about public spaces, United Nations and World Health Organizations have standards for what kind of per capita open space cities should have. And it's approximately 9 square meters per capita. Most Indian cities are much, much below this. Mumbai, for example, has one of the worst per capita open space in the country. And this is hugely problematic at any given time, but it's especially being felt at this point in time. You've probably seen the news a couple of weeks ago when things started opening up in Mumbai. Everybody have been crowding in Marine Drive and in bandstand, because, you know, there's just such a huge lack of public realm in our cities, even to just go out and get a, you know, get access to sun, light and air. And, you know, those are our basic rights. So we are hugely kind of constrained by the existing structure of the city to get access to kind of basic amenities. We all have to acknowledge that public realm is the soul of the city. You know, I always say, you know, this is philosophically, the quality of sidewalk in your city is directly proportional to the quality of your democracy. In Mumbai, even though 50% of the city walks as their primary mode of transit, we do not have footpaths, you know, and we have to think, are we making democratic investments in our public realm? Often we've seen investment for the 1% more than the larger community. So I think as we think about the long term, you know, think about visioning the future of our cities, it's important to invest. So majority of the city thrives. Invest in sidewalks, invest in biking, invest in public transportation, which is more safe. And I think that should be the you know, charter as we think about this moment in time and how it can shape our urban futures. Now, coming to the short term, you know, we've, as you know, India has had one of the most stringent lockdowns around the world, and we are still kind of battling this huge crisis. And we've started to unlock the economy because we've had to, because we were in a situation where you would face death by COVID versus death by hunger. So, you know, you can't really, we're not in a position to, you know, keep the economic kind of lockdown going on forever. And as Hitesh said, we have to learn to live with this pandemic for at least a year or year and a half till, you know, there's a way to manage it. And that's a little blip in our history. 2 years is not a big deal in historic terms, but choices that we make now can be, you know, long term. And coming back to living with the virus, we have to acknowledge that most of the GDP of India is concentrated in cities. So a large part of reopening our economy is about figuring out how do you safely reopen our cities during this pandemic. And it's really the single biggest step to reopening our economy. If we can't figure out how do you safely reopen public realm and public infrastructure with the reality of this new pandemic, the unlock is going to fail. So I think we have to put our collective brain power into making cities work with this reality, which may be just 2 or 3 years, but we have to live with it. And I think I'd say 2-3 points. One is, I think civic responsibility is key. Citizens have to start taking you know, responsibilities themselves, right? We have to follow health norms of physical distancing at this point in time. Do not go out if you're showing infections. Wear masks. Those are, I guess, fundamental step to managing COVID in the short time. Second is the public infrastructure, and I think I can see some images that were being shown by Hitesh about, you know, public realm across the world has been open even during the lockdown because people have been able to exercise and everything. And we're starting to see tactical markings to enable social distancing guidelines. And the most important transformative ideas at this moment has been that we are repurposing our urban commons and public realm for safer, you know, experience of the city, to walk more safely and for safer mobility. You know, for starters, we can open our roads for pedestrians by, you know, taking over parts of the car movement, you know, because most parts of this, most people are still working from home. So you can actually rethink the road diet and give more space to cyclists and walkers, because you will see more local activities than long distance traveling. So as we, think about pop-up infrastructure and pop-up kind of tactical ideas in the medium term, it's also important, I think, at this moment to think about the long term on how do we use and enable the investments that we make to be more people-centric, to be more livable, and respond to the other big emergency that we are all facing at this moment, which is climate emergency.
Thank you, Pratima. Those were really great points. And, there's a lot of experimentation and innovation that is already happening. So it's really interesting to see what comes out of it. Omna, I want to bring you in. In Malaysia, can you share a little bit about what's happening in Malaysia? And during this pandemic, it's civil society that has really stepped in to fill the gaps and played a huge role in making sure that people are safe, people are taken care of, communities are strengthened. So going forward, what is required to strengthen a partnership between government and civil society? And I'd also like to say even private sector, because without them, we won't have the money to do most of the stuff that we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Elsa. And greetings and salam, as we say in Malaysia, to everyone here. Good day and good evening. I'm just sitting back and I realize that I think I'm the only one who's not directly from an urban planning background, and my area is really on promoting gender equality. And also in terms of government and civil society partnerships. And thanks, Elsa. Thanks for inviting me to this very interesting conversation. There's much to learn. What I want to share is really, your question about what are these relationships that can move us forward, but a little bit about what's happening in Malaysia now. Malaysia, I will say we are recovering. We're in the recovering phase of the pandemic, and we've been through this global phenomenon of going through with everyone, but we're all at different stages. And Malaysia's in the recovery phase. We are looking at single-digit numbers right now. Kids are going to start going back to schools, and people are going back to work as such. But in terms of the civil society, as you said, but before that, maybe I want to share some of the learnings that the pandemic has taught us. And one of it is really that it has brought to the fore social economic inequalities that we have always known to exist. But the situation that the pandemic brought about has brought that to the fore. The other critical learning from the pandemic is that it has brought to light the capacities of societal actors. And if you all would have seen the quote that I had shared in the e-invite that went out, was that everyone is a protagonist in ensuring a safe and inclusive society, public space. And so I'd like to focus a little bit on that as we go along, but maybe a little bit on what our CSOs, our heroes of our time, the CSOs, the touch points of the grassroots have been doing. It has really been an awakening for all of us. And in a way, from a CSO background, this is something we've already known all the while, that CSOs are indeed the heroes in so many ways, and they have really been the ones who've been connected to the grassroots directly. And I think government is also realizing that now. It has been the period of the ordinary people. And you find that despite the social distancing, people have come together in spirit and literally on the ground, making acts of humanity a priority. And what we have also seen, and I think it's not only in Malaysia, is that the response to calls for help have been swift and unprecedented. And you see numerous NGOs and CSOs, individuals, the haves, providing for the have-nots, even during the early stage of the pandemic, where they were really on the ground, mobilizing the public and really going and helping people. And while our frontliners must really be saluted, But then we also see many, many behind the scenes people who are working to serve others during this very difficult time. And also private sector, you mentioned private sector, corporations and foundations have also been in Malaysia and everywhere else, I'm sure, donating millions to ensure there are sufficient medical supplies and essentials for everyone. Now, let me just come back to the whole idea of protagonists, and I'd like to refer to them as protagonists of society. And this is something, a critical learning from the pandemic, that is the capacities of social actors to deliver, not only during the pandemic, it has shown the capacities of everyone, but really in writing our new normal and moving forward, I think we really have to look at what is the relationship between all these actors of society. We know for a fact that government has done quite a bit in Malaysia, and that is why I think we are really at this recovery phase right now. But one thing that we know for sure is that government can't do it alone. And we are learning more and more that we definitely need a whole of society approach. And that really goes back to, I do quite a bit of work on the Sustainable Development Goals here, and one thing that we keep singing the song of leaving no one behind. And in leaving no one behind, how can we reach the furthest first? And we know that this is really the tagline and strategy of the SDG. And in knowing that government can't do it alone, what we are really, even in Malaysia, really promoting for is the whole of society approach. And looking approach, we're looking at the three protagonists, right? The individuals, the institutions, and the communities. And I heard the same thing being reiterated by the other speakers before me who spoke about individuals, and also the institution as in the government and the community as a whole, and what role do they have to play. I'd like to think not just in reimagining public spaces, but really in delivering on development for the country. Now, in terms of what kind of participation in the new normal, I'd like to think that the government and the society should look at a more people-centered approach. How can our relationships become more meaningful? How can it be more inclusive? What would diversity look like in the new normal? And how can we ensure a collaborative approach? How can it be meaningful without just being a tick in the box? How can we ensure that civil society and the voices of people on the ground, not only civil society actors, but also the people on the ground, how can we ensure that their voices are also heard at the tables of decision makers? How can we be more consultative? How can it be a more engaging relationship? Will there be transparency in sharing of information, accountability, and more importantly, I think, how can we separate politics from actual meaningful governance? So I think this calls for reconceptualizing of relationships, for recognizing the key roles of the three protagonists. Also to harness the potential of every individual to contribute towards the betterment of society. And I think this recognition is, I think, fundamental to how we move forward in managing this relationship. And also, as we are ensuring everyone has got voice and agency, how can we also ensure capacities and capabilities are built in individuals? How can we ensure trusting of one another, that we become united in purpose and we are attentive to moral and emotional well-being for all? This requires a moral commitment and really a shared identity for everyone. Again, the other thing that we found very, that we're learning from, but I think we're coming along, is about institutionalizing partnerships between civil society and government. And we've seen that in the women's movement, that we've been able to do that in terms of institutionalizing our relationship with the government agencies. And we take baby steps moving forward, but we are heading there. And I think also, maybe just to end this particular segment of my presentation, is to look at some critical questions that I think we all need to answer. That is, what characterizes a flourishing community? Yeah, and what can capacity for social development be released? How can the capacity be released for a growing number of participants? How can we foster collective commitment to shared priorities and strengthen that vision for a common future? And I think more critical, it shouldn't be cliche. I think if we should sing this song more now than ever before, is how are we ensuring that no one is left behind? And what actual steps are we taking to reach the furthest first? So I know I'm throwing more questions and answers, but I think these are questions that we all need to collectively talk about. And I hope that maybe in the breakout sessions, we can address some of them as well.
Thank you, Omna. And leave no one behind cannot be just, a catchy slogan. It has to be practiced. And we have Supriya from Coro, India, who works with a constituency that is very vulnerable. So Supriya, these people that you work with, citizens of cities, they live and they work in extremely dense conditions where social distancing is not possible. And, like you shared a statistic in an earlier talk where for about 1,500 people, there's just one toilet block, which is impossible. In this COVID-19 scenario, that's the breeding ground in fact. So what facilities are we giving our people and how are we protecting them? So how can we reimagine a space for them? Can you please share a little bit about your work and some of your ideas on this topic?
Yes, sure. Thank you so much, Elsa, because the thought has started from the day you asked for a quote. We have been doing these conversations all along our teammates in various different forums. But asking specifically for a quote made us to think more deeply. So I think I reimagine the space, public space, which will recognize and actualize claims of denied and unclaimed spaces of the marginalized. So if this question comes to me, how do we reimagine the city? Then the quick answer could be, by some people, could be decongest and decentralize. But I think we need to go more deeply and beyond these two words. So I will share my experience from the lower income communities, urban slums or settlements, which have a basic lack of housing facilities, water, sanitation. They are always at the risk. It may be due to environment or any other factors, but they are at the risk. So these are the such communities which are always not at the center of the city, but at the periphery of the city. So anything that comes up at the city, they are always left out from the center of the city, but they are the most affected, impacted by anything that happens in the city. So as some of you have mentioned that in Mumbai, we have been warned about the city's density, 31,700 person per square kilometer, as being the highest in the world. I think after this, I need not explain how and what about social distancing that comes along with this space and this density per person per square kilometer. And in these contexts, when we reimagine the public space, the first and foremost thing that comes to my mind is breaching the gap between we and them. And let us take this opportunity to think with them, for them, and facilitate their voices. Because can a neighborhood to suit the post-pandemic reality be designed without taking into account the voices of everyone who inhabits the space? No. So in planning for the post-COVID world, first area of focus ought to be streets, informal settlements, lower income communities where, as I've shared with you, that thousands of people compete just to share toilet disconnected from sanitation and sewerage infrastructure. But we also, while reimagining the public spaces, what do you mean by a public space is different for me, different for a person in the community, different for a person in the metro cities, different for a person in the rural area. It is different for everyone. So when I was discussing about this in our with our teammates, they gave me so many different examples. When I asked them what are public spaces for you all, so where a house in a 10 by 10 household, we say that where 8 to 10 people are packed in one house, I mean, stepping out of the house itself a public space for them, and it is so much needed to breathe as as to have a fresh air and sunlight and everything. So public space is also a private space in public realm for all of them. And I feel let us take this opportunity to strengthen urban democracy. Let us take this opportunity again. Mumbai has taken this opportunity when we were developing when we had a city development plan of Mumbai. But yes, there are some shortcomings. So why not to take this opportunity again to think, to ask a vegetable vendor, to ask a domestic worker, to ask auto rickshaw drivers, what do they feel about a public space where they want to be? Let's ask children, what do they think about public spaces? Because for some of us, those who have a balcony, those who have a garden, during these lockdown spaces, that have been something which gave us space to think. But for those who step out of their door and it's all public space, and there are different and there are no privacy settings, life is different, and reimagining that space for them is also very different. So I feel that let us just jot down few facilities. I will say, when it comes to space for them, it's not just open space. Let me tell you, there are no open spaces left, at least in the metro cities, and there are so many people who are trying to preserve them. So the facilities, like say for example, wash facilities, housing, when we say about mobility, like safely walking, or how, say for example, how street can be one way to reimagining their space, how streets can be connected to these communities so that these communities are connected to the city and being part of this city. Then they have an erratic water supply, broken drains, patchy electricity, absence of street lights, inadequate classrooms, childcare, livelihood. I mean, it's like, it's not just, these are also spaces, those needs to be rethought of. And I think let's convert this into an opportunity to rethink. Let us get those things on board again, to be discussed, to be, and most importantly, as all of us have been reiterating in, and I also want to reiterate, yes, public participation. How can we, for those whom we are going to reimagining, plan these public spaces, how can they have the voice in this planning? And how can we ensure, strengthen public service systems? How can we regulate the market oriented policies for housing, water supply, or anything? How can we play a role in doing that? And also we have all of us have a big role to play, because there have been anxiety, fear, stigma, myths around COVID. So when we design our public spaces, we also have to consider these all things that are coming our own way. I mean, I will not say post-COVID, but when we are going to live with COVID. And of course, involving multiple stakeholders. I'm not saying you have to hear the voices of the communities, but also we need to do a partnership with the governments, urban planners, architects, because yes, collectively we can reimagine the city. And lastly, I just want to highlight that this pandemic has highlighted again need for building spaces that are not ghettos, but non-segregated, mixed class, mixed use neighborhood that will allow people to support each other, that will ensure neglect and poverty, which is not, locked into pockets of vulnerable population. So that they can also have access to the city. And it's like your question of how I was stuck. How do I answer this? I was discussing with my team. It's very difficult in densely populated urban slums like that of Mumbai. But then we started reorganizing our thoughts, and I could get answers to many answers to your how we can reimagine. So how the data is going to play a role, how people's involvement can play a role, how we can how we need to rework the policies, and so on and so on. But I think everything has to be done to ensure safety and dignity of people. So that should be the bottom line of the thinking.
Thank you, Supriya. You've raised a lot of questions, and at the basis of it is dignity, but I would also like to point out the element of trust. I feel trust between citizens and government, citizens and citizens is so critical, and it's showing up in COVID-19. So what we're going to do now is, I had a second round of questions, but I think, we won't have time for the breakouts then. And I really want to do the breakouts to get the learnings from you in the audience, because you have all the knowledge and expertise from your countries as well. So we are going to deliberate on 3 questions. But in the meantime, I'm going to ask Kajal to just post a second poll. And anybody who is more comfortable discussing in Hindi, we have one breakout room for only Hindi speakers. So please put in the chat section if you want to be in the Hindi room. In the meantime, I'm going to read out 3 questions that were posted earlier to the panels, before this event. Shama Fadels asks, how can we design open spaces according to the new regulation of physical distancing in historically crowded cities? Spatiality is very old and expensive according to the meter cost. Kazi Baby says, how is it possible to redesign the marketplace and the bus stop for keeping social distance? It is important to involve community people through data collection and surveys. Akanksha Chaurasia says, in this time when COVID-19 has aggravated the diversities in our country, there is a chance that it can hasten the privatization of public spaces and result in gated communities. How will the needs of the vulnerable groups, low-income residents who generally have less access to open spaces be catered? We also have some more questions. Reimagining Dharavi, which is a huge slum in Bombay. But we also have Shivani, not Shivani. Yeah. Shivani is the bilingual facilitator. We had a question from Dr. Abu Bakr Sadiq, who says open spaces are public spaces where residents express freedom. Now with COVID-19, how can we maintain social distancing and hygiene in the planning, design, and management of open spaces? Ruchi Varma asks, our local governments fail to engage in long-term thinking. There is a huge governance lag that acts as systemic obstruction of health and human rights of urban denizens. This is a huge link into holistically reimagining public spaces. Humanizing and democratizing cities can only happen when the local is strengthened. The SDGs already have a strong mandate to achieve this. And Sakshi asked, do the SDGs overlook the mandates and guidelines they propose? So we have 3 questions for you. And we are going to now go into breakout rooms to discuss those 3 questions. So if you've never done a breakout room, you will get a pop-up on your screen saying move into this breakout room. It's named after your facilitator, so please click on it. You will have about 25 minutes to discuss 3 questions and also hear from each other. So please make sure that everybody has a chance to speak. And once nominate somebody to come back once we are back in the main plenary to report back. So Kajal, do we have the results of this poll? Can somebody from my team read it out, because Kajal and I can't really see the results?
We still have people doing the poll. So we have about 50% that have voted. Some are still in the process of voting. So
I
we'll
think
just
to end it, Tanya, because we have to go into breakout. So can you please?
Sure. So we have 25% that say I feel powerless. 2% say it's irrelevant to me. 2% feels it does not impact me. However, 66% say I work to improve it personally and professionally, and 6% feel they are an influencer and have an impact.
Yes, so the question we were asking you is, how do you feel about your role in reimagining public spaces? And now you have that chance, because you have the opportunity to share your knowledge, your ideas in your breakout room. We are capturing all your thoughts. So please, Kajal, can you send us into the breakout rooms? Please don't forget to click it so that you're taken into your breakout rooms. And the questions are posted by Kajal. In the chat section. So the questions are, do share examples in your country where public space is being reimagined. How can we co-create this change in cities? What support is required from the government for reimagining public spaces? If you want to be in the Hindi speaking room, please let us know so we can assign you accordingly.